Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Big Rostermania developments going down last night with basically confirmation as to what Toronto Ultra are trying to do as they try and be at least the 4th best team in next season's CDL, but also the final piece of the puzzle seemingly locked in for Carolina, leaving Huke, the 2020 Call of Duty World Champion, potentially out of a starting spot for next season. Is this justified on recent years' performances, or is this a big miss by some of the teams in the league? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Here's Insight and of course Hicksy. They will not be on the same roster for next season. Insight's going to stay on Toronto. Hicksy, we are pretty sure, is going over to the Seattle Sur to join that team, of course. And that's a big talking point as we'll get into here in a second. Here are the boys, all on the red white as well. Absolutely love it as ever. But yeah, pretty funny stuff. Josh, Harry, F. etc. But look, Harry's an interesting one because he was on that Gentlemates team at the World Cup, did a good job. And there's just many players in Harry's position who have proven to be solid guys, and obviously he'll be in challenges again, I guess, grinding it out this year, that are not necessarily getting a CDL spot. And this year there are just so few, as it stands, rookies coming into the league. We basically have like 5 rookies, and 4 of those are the Falcons guys, and then Rencor on Miami. Pretty much everybody else played at least part of last season. I'm sure there will be, as the season goes on, other changes made, and of course Huke will effectively try to be, I would well imagine, the first name called up when changes are made after Major 1, Major 2, that kind of time. And I imagine that there will be rookies that are given a chance this season, but nonetheless, it's an interesting spot for the league where the rookie classes that we have had over the last several years have very quickly just diminished massively in quality, which I think is, well, an inevitability of the way the CDL and Tier 2 and these things have been run over the last few years, but it's also pretty damn unfortunate for the state of the league right now. Maybe it's just a temporary blip, but it's not exactly a great sign. But let's talk Toronto. They say announcement today, as in yesterday. They turned, well, I didn't turn the noties on because I knew it was coming, and shortly afterwards, they confirmed the following. Insight and CleanX are running it back on the same team again. We've felt like for the last couple of years now, this may not have been happening. Insight and CleanX, even last year when Toronto had their off-season drama, they were potentially going to blow it up, but they've been a duo for just so long, even back on, of course, the Singularity days when they kind of first teamed up. I'm pretty sure famously they played aX's team Envy at that year's World Championship. CleanX made a crazy play, and ever since they both came into the league together, it's been on Toronto effectively. Well, it was CleanX to start with. Insight got his opportunity the year after during Cold War. They dropped Zinni, they put CleanX in, and like, we did think maybe this offseason was the time they were going to split apart, but at the end of the day, they have won an event every single year they have teamed together, which, well, okay, one of the events sometimes people don't count, but let's just go through them real quick. The Cold War season, it was the Major 2. Sure, it was online that year that they won. Vanguard, they won, and of course they were in the Champs Grand Finals that year, and Insight and CleanX have now been in, what, 2 Champs Grand Finals? Won neither of them, unfortunately, but, you know, the placings do speak for themselves in some capacity that this probably makes sense to run it back. Then, of course, in Vanguard, it was the Kickoff Classic that they won. Then Modern Warfare 2, they won, obviously, Major 3 that year with Scrappy in OpTic's backyard, and then the most recent season, they won the first event. So they've always been up there, whatever their teammates have been effectively. You know, Cammy and Bance, of course, was the team back in Cold War. Very different teams over the last couple of years, still winning events in Grand Finals. This year is going to be more of a challenge for sure, but I think for both parties, it probably makes the most sense to stay together. They were given opportunities to depart, or at least they were told, as were the rest of the guys, you're a restricted free agent, you can look for opportunities if you would like. Scrappy did this, Envoy did this, and it became quite clear early on that Toronto simply did not have the funds to maintain that team before they had last season. As a result, Scrap and Envoy got a better opportunity over at Thieves. They went over there. Insight likely did not get a massively better opportunity. I will say that depending on what Cloud9's willingness was to spend big, and to be fair to Cloud9, HyDra basically wanted to leave, so they got paid for that. They could potentially have used that money elsewhere, and, you know, would it have been the worst idea to say to Toronto, okay, look, I know you've lost Scrappy and Envoy to Thieves, how about we take the rest of your team away from you, and we're going to get Insight and CleanX, because if you were Cloud9 building around Sib, then putting Insight and CleanX as a duo with Sib, and then finding another SMG, of course, in that case, the ideal sub would probably be a guy like Gwinn, but you're probably not going to be able to get him off the Ravens, certainly not if you're paying money for Insight and CleanX. So there was just options there maybe for that duo, or even just one of those guys to go to one of those other teams, but I guess the options weren't really there, and Insight just didn't have an opportunity that he thought was better than staying on Toronto, even if that meant taking a bit of a pay cut. I don't know if this is true or not, but of course there have been rumours that Toronto can't afford it, so I imagine that Insight and CleanX, whatever they were getting paid last year, it's probably not going to be as much this year, which is tough, obviously, if that's true, but look, they need to win, right? And it's going to be more difficult than ever to win, given the way things currently stand. And CleanX gives a bit of insight into this and says, back for another season with the OpTic guys, weird off-season, can't wait to get to work already with the new team. So they do have a new team, they just haven't confirmed the full extent of the roster yet, but they have confirmed that Insight and the CleanX are staying around. As I said, I didn't even really mention this tweet, but Insight literally tweeted on August the 19th that he's an RFA, and usually when that's tweeted, 99% of the time, that player is gone. But not on this occasion, and it happened twice this offseason because it was the same story with Sib on Cloud9 as well. They decided in the end to bring him back, but he's going to play CleanX for a 6th consecutive season with the same organisation, which is very rare that a player has really ever done that. I mean, there's only a few in COD history that have had such a long tenure with a single team, or, you know, even sometimes, for example, with Formula or whatever, right? He was on OpTic, then he left OpTic, then he was back on OpTic. Some of these guys have gone from a certain organisation to present, but, you know, often it'll be that they play 6 different Call of Duties, but maybe over a slightly different time span. But no, CleanX is going to join this list. Dashy isn't far away from this either, actually, because, you know, Black Ops 4 and then Cold War to present, meaning only 10 players in history have had this amount of longevity with a single organisation, and CleanX is now going to be one of them. The rest of their team, as we understand, is of course going to be Beans and going to be JoeDeceives. So Insight as the main AR, Beans as the flex, faster AR, Scrappy replacement, effectively. Tough to replace Scrappy, and, you know, I think that Beans can do a really good job on this team. If there was any option out there for free that I would have got to replace Scrappy, Beans would have been the man. Sib, of course, you could have also looked to get, but Toronto ain't got the money to pay for that kind of a buyout, right? So Beans, I think, makes the most sense as an option. Then it's going to be JoeDeceives on the SMG. They were looking for Real. That didn't happen because Heretics said no. They're looking at JoeDeceives. So for me, I think it's a pretty clear-cut 4th best team. I look at the other teams in the league. I'm not sure there's anyone that I have more confidence in than Insight, Beans, CleanX, and JoeDeceives. Certainly on their track record as players, and the fact that CleanX and Insight have always been on a contending team every single year, and I think that will continue again. I think this team is going to be solid. They will have their upset victories against the top 3, but whether they can crack the top 3 is still pretty doubtful. A team that is unlikely to crack the top 3, however, is Ravens, and we'll get to them in a second. Before we do, however, CDL Screamintel, Ronnie, is officially on board as part of the Breaking Point crew. Of course, he's done a great job for years now tweeting out scrim results, but also getting all the insider information, and this off-season, like, he was basically flawless, and everything that he's, you know, said has pretty much come true. So he's done a killer job of it. He was also on the Dope Check show that we did last weekend and did a great job of that as well. So we thought it only makes sense to bring him in as part of the Breaking Point crew, and I'm absolutely happy to have him on board. And alongside this yesterday, he did drop the Vivid intel that, yeah, Vivid to Carolina is seemingly now going to be a done deal as well. So we talked about this Ravens team, the fact that they were a team of 3 for some time, with, of course, Slasher, TJ, and Gwinn. That was, you know, the intended team of 3 they had, and that was a team of 3 they've had locked down, it seems, for quite some time at this point. Their 4th was meant to be Mack, but Mack decided, because of this man, it seems, well, this is a rumour on my part, but, you know, speculation, because of this man, Accuracy, in the background, who we think is possibly coaching that Cloud9 team for next season, that Mack was going to go to Cloud9 instead. And actually, it's kind of worked out, because Mack and Vivid, I believe they get along rather well, and because Mack departed, he's actually, you know, both of them are going to end up getting a spot, it seems, in the league. Now, do I like Mack's decision to leave this team as a potential flex option with Slasher, TJ, and Gwinn, and go over to Cloud9 alongside Kremp on the SMG? I'm not so sure that I do, but apparently Ravens believed this deal was done with Mack until Cloud9 New York entered the frame for Mack and convinced him to join them instead. This therefore left Nero without a spot. The entry SMG was swiftly targeted by the Ravens, which makes sense, as was CleanX, but both players swiftly declined and decided to join up on the Minnesota Rokkr. So that's a pretty interesting development, right? That apparently Nero and CleanX, both players that are now going to go to Rokkr, they were both targeted because, you know, they need a flex somewhere, and if they brought Nero in, he'd be on the SMG, but Gwinn might be flexing, or TJ might be flexing, and maybe that's still true. If they did bring in CleanX instead, then CleanX would be just the straight up flex, I would say, with Slasher as the main AR, and then TJ and Gwinn as the subs. But both of those guys said no to the Ravens, which is gonna create a pretty interesting rivalry between those two teams next year, especially because, at least in my opinion, I prefer the Ravens team, I think, than I do to the Rokkr team. So I'm semi-surprised, I will say, that these guys would turn down the opportunity to go to Ravens. I'm intrigued to know what their thought process is. Leaving the Ravens in a tough spot, they targeted the best available player on the market in Vivid, and you know, it sounds like Vivid is now accepted the offer, and it's going to be Slasher, Vivid, TJ, and Gwinn as your team of 4. And that's a nice team, to be honest. I actually like what they've done here. They have some pace if required. I mean, Vivid, TJ, Gwinn, any one of those guys can probably go to the flex role. I know there's been talk that Vivid maybe wants to run it. Gwinn could run it as well. Tej could probably run the flex. Like, they've got options there, and if it's a 3 SMG meta, they'll be fine. Slasher is veteran AR, good leader, and of course you can debate on that, whether that's really necessary anymore, but of the players in Slasher's kind of category, Slasher, Attach, Clayster, Accuracy, these type of guys, you know, I would pick Slasher over, like, all of those guys in my opinion. I actually think he gets underrated a fair bit, Slasher, by the community, and also historically, at least on tryout games, he has been incredibly good. So, and also absolute LAN player as well. So I like what Ravens have done here. I'm intrigued that CleanX, if given the Ravens offer, has declined it, because they're going to Estral and Dew, and it's a nice team. Like, I like the Rokkr team as well. I think it has more question marks to me than the Ravens team does, but nonetheless, both of those players decided to go there instead of Ravens, so that's going to create a pretty interesting rivalry for next season. But also what it does mean is that Huke is out of a job, and he was on the Seattle Surge team last year. They've effectively dropped him for Hicksy, which is a question for sure. I mean, aBeZy out, Nastie in, I get it. I think there's an argument that aBeZy, you know, could have ended up still elsewhere. Could they have put him onto like Gentlemates or something? I don't really know, but it's something worth considering. I know some people would say, well, is Priestahh really all that anymore? Could you have put aBeZy and Lynz on the Gentlemates roster with Kismet and Skyz? Possibly, it would have been an interesting option, but they're not going to do that. But, you know, I get it from Seattle's side, wanting to say, okay, Abuzah and 04, very, you know, the best players of last season. We're going to try and upgrade on aBeZy, despite the fact that he was pretty consistent, certainly on LAN, and we're going to put Nastie in. I get it. The other one, though, Huke for Hicksy, is definitely a question, right? Because Huke is a player with lots of talent, lots of potential, but for whatever reason, he can never seem to put everything together in terms of the whole package. He can slay, he can bring impact, but the consistency, the decision-making is not necessarily always there. And, you know, Rambo worked with Huke before and basically played a part in dropping him back in Dallas Empire Cold War, and it seems like the same thing has potentially happened again here. But then again, when Huke's been on a good, consistent roster, which of course he's had a part in creating, such as, let's say, OpTic Texas at the end of Modern Warfare 2, he was in grand finals like every single time, and you know, he's won a world championship, he's won 5 championships every single year that he's competed. He's had at the very worst a top 4 placing, and he's made a finals in 5 of the 8 years that he's competed. So you know, Huke on paper, like, his resume does kind of speak for itself, but it seems like Surge are passing up the chance to sign him again, and no other organization is giving him a go. Like, it could have been an option here for Ravens. Could they have signed Huke instead of Vivid? I mean, it's a possibility. We know that Slasher and Huke, however, have teamed together before to not the greatest success, to be fair, when they, well, okay, back in Advanced Warfare they did well, back in World War II didn't really go to plan. So I get it from both sides, but it's still a tricky situation for all parties, especially Huke. Is he going to have to start in challenges? Is he going to do that? Is that going to work out for him? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.